Under the harsh midday sun, a small wedding courtyard falls silent. A young bride stands frozen in her faded white dress, her hands trembling as whispers cut through the heat. People laugh openly, fingers point. At the center of it all, a man is mocked for his plain face and quiet posture, forced to endure humiliation in broad daylight. No one notices how calm his eyes remain. No one asks why he doesn't defend himself. Then, from the dusty road nearby, a luxury car slows and stops. Its presence feels wrong, heavy, unexplained, and, just as the crowd turns to look, everything pauses. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. And if you enjoy powerful emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Eunice Kiplagat had learned long before her 18th birthday that silence was safer than hope. She grew up in a small African community where poverty was not a season but a permanent climate. The houses leaned on one another as if tired of standing alone. The soil cracked under the sun, and every year promised rain that came late or not at all. In that place, dreams were considered childish luxuries, especially for girls. Eunice was the youngest child of Samuel and Ruth Kiplagat. Her mother had once been known for her gentle laughter, but years of hunger and worry had thinned her voice into whispers. Her father, Samuel, carried the weight of shame more heavily than love. He was a man terrified of being poor, terrified of being seen as a failure, and even more terrified of the whispers that followed him through the village. Eunice helped her mother sell vegetables at the roadside. She washed clothes for neighbors. She walked barefoot to fetch water before sunrise. Yet even in exhaustion, there was something in her that refused to harden. She listened more than she spoke. She observed more than she complained. And when she smiled, it was quiet, almost apologetic, like she feared happiness might offend someone. The news came on a dry afternoon when the air felt thick and unmoving. Samuel sat on the wooden bench outside their house, his elbows resting on his knees. Ruth stood near the doorway, twisting the edge of her wrapper in her hands. Eunice noticed the silence before she noticed their faces. "You will sit," her father said. Not looking up, Eunice obeyed. "There is a man," Samuel continued. "He has agreed to marry you." The words fell like stones. Eunice blinked. "Marry me." "Yes," he said quickly, as if speed would soften the blow. "He is willing. That alone is a blessing." Ruth finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Eunice, listen to your father." Eunice's heart began to pound. "Who is he?" Samuel hesitated. "His name is Jacob Kalaba." The name meant nothing to her. That scared her more than if it had. People in the village did not hide information. News traveled faster than wind. If Eunice had never heard the name, it meant only one thing: no one cared enough to talk about him. "There are rumors," Ruth said softly, avoiding her daughter's eyes. Rumors of what Eunice asked. Samuel exhaled sharply. "They say he is not handsome, not successful, not normal." The words stung even though they were not aimed at her. Eunice's throat tightened. "Then why me?" Her father's voice hardened. "Because he has agreed. Because he will pay the bride price. Because our debts will be settled." There it was, the truth, naked and unapologetic. Eunice felt the room tilt. "You are selling me," she said quietly. Samuel stood up so suddenly the bench scraped the ground. "Watch your mouth. You are saving this family." Ruth stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "My child, we have no choice." Eunice looked at her mother, then really looked at her. The defeat, the fear, the years of swallowing disappointment, and Eunice understood something painful and irreversible. This was already decided. That night, Eunice lay awake on the mat she shared with her younger cousin. She stared at the ceiling, counting cracks, listening to distant dogs barking and the soft breathing of the house. Her chest felt tight as if something precious was being taken without permission. She did not cry. Crying would not change anything. The first time Eunice saw Jacob Kalaba was 2 days later. He arrived in the late afternoon, walking instead of riding. He wore plain trousers and a simple shirt, clean but old. His shoes were dusty. His posture was straight. His steps calm, unhurried. Eunice watched from behind her mother as whispers rose instantly around him. That's him. So this is the man, poor girl. She studied his face carefully. He was not deformed, not frightening, but he was not handsome, in the way the village admired. His features were ordinary, his expression unreadable. There was no confidence that demanded attention, no charm that softened first impressions. Jacob greeted Samuel respectfully. He greeted Ruth with a small bow of his head. When his eyes finally met Eunice's, he did not stare. He nodded once. That small act confused her more than anything else. Most men in the village looked at girls like Eunice, with hunger or ownership. Jacob's gaze held neither. It held distance, and something else she could not yet name. They spoke little. The discussion was brief. The bride price was mentioned. Numbers were agreed upon. No one asked Eunice what she wanted. When Jacob stood to leave, he paused. "I will not force her," he said calmly, his voice low but steady. "Marriage should not begin with fear." The courtyard went quiet. Samuel frowned. Ruth looked stunned. Eunice felt her heart skip painfully. Jacob did not wait for approval. He simply nodded again and walked away. That night, Eunice cried for the first time. Not because she was afraid of Jacob, but because for a brief moment she had seen what respect looked like and knew how rare it was. The wedding preparations moved quickly, as if speed could outrun doubt. Neighbors came not to help, but to observe. Some pitied Eunice. Others mocked her behind thin smiles. A young girl, wasted. At least he agreed to take her. Beauty would have been cruel to him. Eunice heard it all. She lowered her eyes and kept working. On the morning of the wedding, the sun rose harsh and bright, as if refusing to hide the truth. Eunice stood in her faded white dress, her hands shaking as her mother adjusted the cloth around her waist. "You must endure," Ruth whispered. "That is what women do." Eunice nodded. When Jacob arrived dressed as simply as before, laughter broke out among the guests. No one tried to silence it. Mockery was easier when done together. Jacob stood still, absorbing it without reaction. Eunice looked at him, then really looked at him standing alone under the open sky, humiliated without protest. Something shifted inside her. This marriage had been forced on her. Her future decided without consent. But she was not the only one paying a price. As they stood before Pastor Emmanuel Mwangi, Eunice realized something she had not allowed herself to think before. Whatever this marriage was, it was not built on love, but it was also not built on cruelty. And in that fragile space between fear and dignity, a story far more complicated than sacrifice was about to begin. If Eunice had hoped that marriage would soften the voices around her, she was wrong. The morning after the wedding arrived with no celebration, no special treatment, no sudden respect. The same sun rose, the same dust settled, the same eyes followed her as she walked beside Jacob through the village paths. Only now the whispers had changed shape. "That's the girl who married him. She could have done better. At least she won't be lonely. Who else would take him?" The words were never said loudly enough to demand response. They were designed to wound quietly, the way people wounded best. Jacob walked beside her without touching her hand. His pace was steady, neither rushing nor dragging her along. Eunice noticed this too. Everything about him felt intentional, in a way she could not yet understand. When they reached the small house Jacob lived in, Eunice stopped. It was modest, smaller than her parents' home. The roof had been repaired unevenly. The doorway creaked when he pushed it open. Inside there was little furniture, but everything was clean. Nothing felt temporary. "This is where I live," Jacob said simply. Eunice nodded. She had no expectation to compare it against. Poverty had taught her not to hope for more. "I will sleep here," Jacob said, pointing to a thin mattress in the corner. "You can take the bed." Eunice froze. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said, not meeting her eyes. "You didn't choose this." The words settled heavily between them. That night, Eunice lay awake listening to Jacob's breathing from across the room. It was slow, controlled, distant. She wondered how a man mocked so openly could remain so intact. In the days that followed, Eunice began to notice patterns. Jacob woke early, earlier than anyone else she had ever known. He washed, dressed, and left without explanation. Sometimes he returned before sunset, sometimes long after dark. When she asked where he went, he answered politely, but vaguely. "Work." "What kind of work?" she asked once. "Enough," he replied. It was not rude. It was final. The village did not let them exist quietly. One afternoon, Eunice went to fetch water. Jacob insisted on carrying the container back with her. As they walked, a group of women gathered near the well, their laughter sharp and deliberate. "Look at him," one said loudly. "A man who needs a wife to feel important." Another added, "At least she is young. Maybe she will make him forget his face." Eunice felt heat rise in her chest. She wanted to turn to shout to defend him. Jacob didn't react. He placed the container on his shoulder and kept walking. That angered her more than the insults. That evening, Eunice confronted him. "Why do you let them talk like that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why don't you say something?" Jacob paused, considering her question, as if it deserved respect. "Because they are not talking to me," he said. "They are talking to their own fears." Eunice frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "It will," he replied gently. His calm unsettled her. It made her feel small, emotional, exposed. And yet there was no condescension in his tone. Only patience. The next humiliation came at the market. Veronica Adebayo stood near the stalls, draped in fine fabric, her jewelry catching the sunlight. She was known in the community for her wealth and for reminding others of it. When she saw Eunice and Jacob approaching, her lips curved into a slow smile. "So this is the couple everyone is talking about," she said loudly. "The child bride and the man no one wanted." People laughed. Eunice felt her face burn. Veronica turned to Jacob. "Tell me, did you pay extra for her youth, or was desperation enough?" The crowd waited. Jacob met Veronica's gaze calmly. "Have a good day," he said. That was all. The laughter died awkwardly. Veronica scoffed, offended by his refusal to play along. Eunice walked away, shaking. That night she sat alone outside the house, staring at the stars. Jacob joined her without a word, sitting a respectful distance away. "Does it never hurt?" she asked suddenly. Jacob looked at the sky. "It does. Then why endure it?" "Because endurance is temporary," he said. "Character lasts." Eunice turned to him, startled. "You talk like someone who has seen another world." Jacob smiled faintly. "Maybe I have." The moment passed, but it stayed with her. Days turned into weeks. Eunice began to feel something unexpected: safety. Jacob never raised his voice, never questioned her movements, never demanded obedience. When money was needed for food, it appeared quietly. When repairs were required, they were handled without drama. Yet nothing about their life matched the image of a struggling man. One afternoon, Eunice noticed Jacob speaking on the phone outside. His posture was different, his voice lower, sharper, confident. "Yes," he said. "Delay the signing." A pause. "No, I will handle it." When he noticed her watching, he ended the call. "Who was that?" she asked carefully. "A friend," he said. Eunice did not believe him. That night, doubt crept into her thoughts like a slow poison. Who was Jacob Kalaba? Why did people listen when he spoke on the phone? Why did money never seem to be a problem, and why? Despite the humiliation, did he walk through the world as if he belonged everywhere? The questions frightened her, because answers would change everything. The following day, Eunice visited her parents alone. Samuel looked relieved to see her. Ruth hugged her tightly. "Is he kind?" Ruth whispered. "Yes," Eunice said honestly. Samuel nodded. "Kindness does not feed families." Eunice looked at her father then, and for the first time, she did not feel anger. She felt distance. As she walked back to Jacob's house, Eunice realized something quietly, something that shifted the ground beneath her. She had entered this marriage as a sacrifice, but she was beginning to suspect that Jacob Kalaba was not the burden everyone believed him to be. And if that was true, then the real story had not yet revealed its teeth. The house settled into a rhythm that Eunice had never experienced before. Quiet, predictable, almost gentle. There were no sudden demands, no raised voices, no rules she had to memorize to survive the day. Jacob moved through the space like someone careful not to disturb invisible lines. He cooked simple meals when he returned early. He washed his own clothes. He asked, before borrowing things that were already his. For a marriage that had begun with fear, it felt strangely empty of danger. That unsettled Eunice more than cruelty ever had. On the third night, she finally broke the silence that had wrapped around them like a fragile agreement. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" she asked. Jacob looked up from the small table where he was repairing a torn sandal. He did not answer immediately. "Because you needed an exit," he said finally, "and I needed honesty." Eunice frowned. "That doesn't explain anything." Jacob set the sandal aside. "You were being offered, not asked. I recognize that. You didn't know me." "I knew enough," he replied. "You didn't pretend to be grateful." That surprised her. In their world, gratitude was expected even for suffering. "I didn't think you noticed," she said quietly. Jacob met her eyes. "I notice more than people assume." Silence returned heavier, but no longer uncomfortable. The days that followed blurred into each other. Eunice continued her routines, fetching water, cooking, cleaning, but something inside her shifted. She was no longer performing survival. She was living without bracing herself for impact. Still, the village refused to let that peace stand. One afternoon, as Eunice returned from the market, she found Jacob standing near the roadside with two men she had never seen before. Their clothes were neat, their posture formal. When Jacob spoke, they listened. Eunice slowed her steps. "Yes," Jacob said. "That will be fine." The men nodded and left. Jacob turned and saw Eunice watching. "You didn't tell me you had visitors," she said. "They weren't visitors," he replied. "Just people I work with." Again that word, work. Eunice studied his face. There was no guilt there, no panic, only restraint. That night Eunice dreamed of doors she could not open. The following morning brought another test. Veronica Adebayo had decided Eunice's silence was an invitation. She arrived at the house unannounced, her perfume, announcing her presence before her voice did. "So this is where you live now," Veronica said, looking around with exaggerated disappointment. "I expected worse." Eunice stood stiffly. "What do you want?" Veronica smiled. "Advice. You are young, too young to waste your life." Jacob stepped forward. "She didn't invite you." Veronica laughed. "I didn't come for you." She leaned closer to Eunice. "Leave him. A girl like you still has time." Eunice's chest tightened. You don't know him. That's the point, Veronica replied. No one does. Jacob's voice hardened. This conversation is over. Veronica's eyes flicked to him, assessing. You're brave for someone with so little. Jacob held her gaze. I have enough. Veronica scoffed and turned away, but not before planting a final seed. Think carefully, Eunice. Poverty is patient. It waits. After she left, Eunice felt shaken. Not because Veronica was right, but because part of her feared she might be. That evening, Eunice asked Jacob a question she had avoided. Do you regret marrying me? Jacob answered without hesitation. No. Even with all this, she gestured vaguely toward the village. Especially because of it, he said. She searched his face. Why? Jacob hesitated. Because you see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. Eunice absorbed that slowly. Later that night, the rain came suddenly, pounding the roof with unexpected violence. Eunice woke to the sound of leaking water. She sat up, panicked. Jacob was already moving. He placed buckets, adjusted the roof cloth, worked silently and efficiently. When it was done, he stood soaked, breathing steadily. You didn't have to, Eunice said. Yes, he replied. I did. Something cracked open inside her then. Not love, trust. The next morning, Eunice noticed something else. Money. Not the presence of it, but the absence of anxiety around it. When food ran low, Jacob returned with supplies. When her mother fell ill briefly, medicine appeared. There were no dramatic discussions, no counting of coins, no visible strain. Eunice finally confronted him. You're not poor, she said flatly. Jacob did not deny it. I'm not rich the way people imagine, he replied carefully, but I am not helpless. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's a boundary. Eunice stepped back. She realized then that Jacob Kalaba was not hiding because he was ashamed. He was hiding because exposure would change the balance of everything. The following week, the community gathered for a local event. Eunice went reluctantly. Jacob walked beside her. The laughter started again. Someone shouted, Smile, Jacob, you have a wife now. Another added, She will run once she finds better. Eunice felt her temper rise. She opened her mouth. Jacob touched her arm. No, he said softly. That restraint was not weakness. She saw it clearly now. It was discipline. As they walked home, Eunice finally asked the question that had been forming like a storm. What happens when the truth comes out? Jacob stopped. He looked at her for a long moment. Then people will finally see what they value. And what do you value? She asked. Jacob answered honestly. Choice. That night, Eunice sat alone, staring at the small flame of the lamp. Her life had been shaped by decisions made for her. This marriage had begun as another one of those. But slowly, quietly, something else was happening. She was no longer a sacrifice, waiting to be consumed. She was standing beside a man who chose silence over power, dignity over display. And Eunice understood something that frightened her more than poverty ever had. If Jacob Kalaba was truly not who he appeared to be, then when the truth finally surfaced, it would not be gentle. And she would have to decide, not as a daughter, not as a victim, but as a woman who had learned to choose. By the time Eunice realized she was no longer afraid of waking up beside Jacob, the change had already settled into her bones. Fear had been replaced by something quieter, attention. She noticed how Jacob listened when she spoke, even when her words were small and uncertain. She noticed how he never interrupted, never corrected her, never laughed at her questions. When she was tired, he adjusted his pace. When she was silent, he did not demand explanations. This was not love, she told herself, but it was not indifference either. One evening, Eunice returned from helping her mother and found Jacob in the yard, sleeves rolled up, hands covered in dust. He was repairing the broken fence without being asked. You don't need to do that, she said. It bothers you, he replied, tightening the wire. So it needs fixing. The simplicity of the statement unsettled her. Most men would say it's not important, she said. Jacob looked up. Most men aren't living here. That night, Eunice laughed for the first time since the wedding. It surprised them both. The laughter faded, quickly replaced by an awkward pause. Jacob cleared his throat. I'll finish this tomorrow. Eunice nodded. Thank you. As he walked inside, she remained standing, aware that something had shifted again. Not affection. Awareness. The village, however, was not finished testing her. A week later, Eunice overheard two women whispering as she passed. She stays because she has no options. She smiles now, but she'll regret it. Eunice kept walking, her face neutral, but inside, the words echoed. That night she asked Jacob a question she had been avoiding. Do you ever get angry? Jacob looked thoughtful. Yes, but you never show it. I choose when it's useful, he said. And when is that? When it can protect someone, not when it can entertain others. She studied him carefully. Who taught you that? No one, he replied. Life did. The following day brought unexpected news. Samuel Kiplagat arrived unannounced, his face tight with worry. Eunice knew before he spoke that something was wrong. There are men asking about our land, he said, pacing. They say the debt has grown. Eunice's chest tightened. But Jacob helped before. Samuel scoffed. Help like that doesn't last. Jacob, who had been silent, stepped forward. I'll handle it. Samuel laughed bitterly, with what Jacob did not respond. Eunice watched her father's disappointment shift into anger. You see, Samuel said to Eunice, kindness doesn't feed families. Eunice felt something rise in her, sharp, protective. He didn't have to help at all, she said. Samuel stared at her. You defend him now? Yes, she replied, surprising herself. I do. Samuel left, shaking his head. That night, Eunice could not sleep. She watched Jacob across the room, seated quietly reviewing papers by the lamp's light. The documents were neat, official-looking, not something a struggling man would possess. What happens if you can't help them? She asked. Jacob folded the papers. Then I'll help in another way. Why? She pressed. Why keep saving people who don't respect you? Jacob met her gaze steadily. Because resentment is expensive. I don't invest in it. The answer lingered with her. The next morning, Eunice noticed something unusual. Jacob dressed differently. The same simple clothes, but sharper, cleaner, purposeful. He left early without explanation. By afternoon, word spread quickly. The men threatening Samuel's land had disappeared. Just like that. No confrontation, no shouting, no public humiliation. The debt was settled. Eunice's heart raced. That evening, she confronted Jacob. You did something, she said. Yes, something you shouldn't have been able to do. Jacob sighed. I told you before, I'm not helpless. That's not enough anymore, Eunice said quietly. I live here. I deserve honesty. Jacob was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Honesty has consequences. I already live with consequences, she replied. At least let them be mine. Jacob looked at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You're stronger than you know, he said. That doesn't answer my question. No, he agreed, but it explains why I'm cautious. Eunice stepped back. She realized something painful. Jacob wasn't hiding from her. He was protecting something from her. That night, Eunice dreamed again. This time the door opened. Behind it stood Jacob, but dressed in clothes she had never seen before, standing in places she did not recognize. People bowed, phones rang, decisions were made. Because he spoke. She woke with her heart pounding. The next day, Eunice visited Veronica Adebayo without planning to. Veronica smiled knowingly. You're curious now. What do you know? Eunice asked. Veronica shrugged. Enough to know that some men hide wealth like scars. Eunice stiffened. You're lying. Am I? Veronica replied calmly. Or are you afraid of the truth? Eunice left shaken. That evening Jacob returned late. His shirt was clean, his posture relaxed. Where were you? Eunice asked. Jacob hesitated. Handling things, like always. Yes. The tension between them thickened. I need to know who I married, Eunice said. Jacob looked tired. And I need time, much as it takes for the truth not to destroy you. The words landed heavily. Do you think I'm weak? Eunice asked. No, Jacob replied. I think the world is cruel to women who stand next to powerful men. Eunice felt anger rise. You don't get to decide what I can survive. Jacob met her gaze evenly. And you don't get to demand exposure without understanding the cost. They stood facing each other, neither willing to yield. For the first time since the wedding, there was conflict, not from outsiders, between them. That night, Eunice did not sleep on the bed. She lay awake on the mat staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. She had entered this marriage powerless. Now she felt something new. Expectation, and with it, impatience. Jacob Kalaba was no longer just the man she had been forced to marry. He was a locked door, and Eunice had never been good at waiting. The tension that settled between Eunice and Jacob did not explode. It thickened. It moved into the small spaces between words, into the pauses before answers, into the careful way Eunice watched Jacob, now no longer with uncertainty, but with awareness, sharpened by doubt. Jacob noticed the change immediately. He did not comment on it. That more than anything made Eunice restless. In the days that followed, Jacob became quieter. Not distant, just precise. He spoke only when necessary. He left earlier, returned later. When Eunice asked questions, he answered honestly, but selectively, as if measuring each word against consequences she could not yet see. The village noticed too. People always did. Something has changed, a woman whispered, as Eunice passed the well. He walks like a man who owns land elsewhere, another replied. Speculation grew like weeds. Then came the day that shifted everything. It was market day, hot, crowded, loud. Eunice had gone alone, hoping the familiar routine would calm her thoughts. She was selecting tomatoes when the murmurs began. A black SUV rolled into the open market space. Not common, not subtle. People turned, vendors stopped shouting, children stared. The vehicle did not belong there. Two men stepped out. Their clothes were crisp, their shoes untouched by dust. They did not browse, they scanned. One of them spoke into his phone. Yes, I see her. Eunice's stomach dropped. Before she could move, the man approached her. Mrs. Kalaba, he asked politely. The name sounded strange coming from his mouth. Yes, she replied cautiously. We were told to deliver something, he said, handing her an envelope. Hands trembling, Eunice accepted it. What is this? She asked. A message, he said. From your husband. The men returned to the vehicle and left as quickly as they had arrived. The market erupted into noise. Did you see that? Who are those men? What kind of husband sends people like that? Eunice walked home in a daze. Inside the envelope was a single note. I'll explain tonight. Please trust me. That was all. Trust. The word felt heavier than before. When Jacob returned that evening, the house felt too small to contain the truth, pressing against its walls. Eunice stood before him holding the envelope. Who were they? She asked. Jacob closed the door carefully. People who work for me. For you, she repeated. Yes, that's not what you said before. Jacob sighed. I didn't lie. I delayed. Why? Because the moment you know, he said quietly, nothing will be simple again. Eunice's voice shook. It's already not simple. Silence stretched between them. I don't want the village involved, Jacob continued. I don't want eyes on you. Why would anyone watch me? She asked. Jacob looked at her, then really looked at her. Because power draws attention, he said, and women standing near it pay the price. The words chilled her. You think I can't handle attention. I think attention doesn't ask permission. That night Eunice could not sleep. She replayed the market scene over and over. The respect in the men's voices, the speed with which they moved, the way the crowd had fallen silent. That was not the life of a struggling man. The next morning, the village buzzed. Veronica Adebayo arrived at Eunice's house without invitation, her smile sharp with satisfaction. So, she said, settling into the chair, it seems my suspicions were correct. Eunice crossed her arms. What do you want to warn you? Veronica replied. Or to congratulate you. I'm not sure which yet. About what your husband, Veronica said smoothly. He's not what he pretends to be. Eunice's jaw tightened. You don't know him. Veronica laughed softly. Oh, but I know his type. Men who hide wealth are never hiding it for love. Eunice felt anger rise. Leave. Veronica leaned forward. Be careful, Eunice. When the truth comes out, the world will not ask if you were ready. After she left, Eunice felt something break loose inside her. That evening, Jacob did not return until long after dark. When he did, Eunice did not wait for explanations. I want to know everything she said. Jacob set his bag down slowly. If I tell you, you can't unhear it. Then tell me anyway. Jacob sat. I am not poor, he said simply. Eunice exhaled sharply. I know. I own companies. I manage assets across countries. People answer when I call. Her chest tightened. I did not come to this village to deceive you, Jacob continued. I came to disappear. Disappear, she whispered. Yes, from expectations, from transactions disguised as relationships, from women who loved my name before my face. Eunice absorbed the words slowly. And me, she asked. You, Jacob said, were honest when you had nothing to gain. The room felt unsteady. So this marriage, Eunice said, was an experiment. Jacob flinched. Number. Then what was it? A risk, he answered. For both of us. Eunice stood abruptly. You let them humiliate you, she said. You let them humiliate me. I protected you. No, she snapped. You decided for me. The words struck him harder than any insult had. You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth, she continued, and now the truth is walking through the market, with bodyguards. Jacob stood too. I wanted you to know me without the noise. And now she demanded. Now, he said quietly, there is no silence left. They stood facing each other, the truth fully between them for the first time. Eunice's voice softened, breaking. I don't know where I belong in your world, Jacob answered honestly. Neither do I. That night, Eunice packed a small bag. I need space, she said. Jacob nodded. I understand. Do you? She asked. Yes, he replied. Because this is where choices begin. Eunice left before dawn, returning to her parents' house with a heart heavier than it had been on her wedding day. She was no longer afraid. She was uncertain. And uncertainty, she was learning, was far more dangerous. Returning to her parents' house felt like stepping backward into a life Eunice had already outgrown. The walls were the same. The air carried the same mixture of dust and boiled maize. But Eunice herself was no longer the quiet girl who obeyed without question. She moved differently now, more slowly, more deliberately, as if every step required permission from a mind still negotiating with truth. Ruth Kiplagat noticed first. You walk like someone who has seen too much, her mother said softly as they prepared dinner together. Eunice did not answer. Samuel noticed later. He noticed the absence. Where is your husband? He asked, not bothering to hide the sharpness in his voice. I needed time, Eunice replied. Samuel scoffed. Time does not solve marriage. Eunice met his gaze. Neither does silence. The room went quiet. That night, Eunice lay awake listening to familiar sounds, her mother's breathing, the distant barking of dogs, the hum of a village that never truly slept. But her thoughts were far from home. They circled Jacob, his calm, his restraint, his secrets, and the way his voice had changed when he finally told the truth. "I came here to disappear." The words followed her into sleep and out again. The following day, news reached the house, before Eunice could avoid it. A luxury vehicle had been seen, parked near Jacob's home. Men in suits had come and gone. Phones had rung, doors had closed, people were talking. Samuel was the last to hear, and the loudest to react. "So it's true," he said, pacing the yard. "Your husband is hiding wealth." Eunice stiffened. "You don't know anything." Samuel laughed bitterly. "I know enough, and now everyone else does too." Eunice felt a familiar ache in her chest. This is exactly why he didn't tell anyone. "Then he should not have married my daughter," Samuel snapped. "Rich men don't come here without reason." That afternoon, Veronica Adebayo visited again. This time she did not pretend concern. "So," Veronica said lightly, settling into the shade. "You left him." Eunice folded her arms. "This doesn't concern you." "Everything concerns me when it affects the balance," Veronica replied. "A billionaire hiding among us changes things." Eunice's stomach twisted. "You enjoy this." Veronica smiled. "I enjoy truth, especially when it embarrasses people." Eunice stood. "Leave." Veronica rose slowly. "Be careful, Eunice. Rich men do not lose easily. They replace." The words lingered long after she left. That evening, Eunice walked alone to the edge of the village where the land dipped and the wind carried distant sounds from the main road. She sat on a rock, staring at nothing until footsteps approached behind her. Jacob stopped a few steps away. "I didn't want to surprise you," he said. Eunice didn't turn. "You already did." He waited. "I didn't come to ask you back," Jacob continued. "I came to ask if you're safe." She laughed softly. "That's ironic." Jacob winced but accepted it. "I won't follow you," he said, "but I won't disappear either." Eunice finally looked at him. His face was tired. Not ashamed tired. "They're talking," she said. "They always will." "Yes," Jacob replied, "but now they talk with curiosity instead of contempt." "That's worse," Eunice said. Jacob nodded. "I know." They stood in silence. "Why did you really choose me?" Eunice asked suddenly. Jacob took a breath. "Because you didn't look at me like I was useful." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, "you didn't measure me." Eunice looked away. "And now? Now you have every reason to." She considered that. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "No," Jacob said immediately. "I regret the pain. That's not the same." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." The wind picked up, carrying dust across the open ground. "I don't know how to stand next to you," Eunice said quietly. "Not now." Jacob's voice was steady. "You don't have to stand anywhere. Not yet." She studied him. "You're not afraid of losing me." "I am," he admitted. "But fear is not permission." That answer stayed with her. The next day something unexpected happened. Nathaniel Okoro arrived. He did not come quietly. He did not come alone. Two vehicles stopped near Eunice's parents' house. People gathered. Phones appeared. Whispers exploded. Nathaniel approached Eunice with a respectful nod. "Mrs. Kalaba," he said. Eunice stiffened at the name. "I came to apologize," Nathaniel continued. "My presence has caused disruption." "You didn't force him to hide," Eunice replied. "No," he said, "but I helped make hiding possible." Samuel stepped forward. "Who are you, a colleague?" Nathaniel said calmly. "And a friend." He turned back to Eunice. "Jacob will not move without your consent." Eunice raised an eyebrow. Consent, yes, Nathaniel said. He built an empire by controlling outcomes. You are the one thing he refuses to control. The words struck her unexpectedly. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you deserve to understand the man you married, Nathaniel replied, not the myth forming around him. Nathaniel left as quickly as he came. The village buzzed louder than ever. That night, Eunice confronted her parents. He is not your escape, Samuel said angrily. He is danger, Eunice replied calmly. He is my husband. Ruth reached for her hand. Are you afraid? Eunice thought carefully. No. Then what are you learning? Eunice said. Later alone, Eunice replayed Nathaniel's words. The one thing he refuses to control. She realized something, then something uncomfortable and powerful. Jacob's secrecy had not been about power. It had been about restraint. The following morning, Eunice returned to Jacob's house. Not to stay, to speak. Jacob opened the door slowly as if unsure what he was allowed to hope for. I'm not coming back yet, Eunice said. I know, he replied, but I need you to answer one question. Honestly. He nodded. If I had been cruel, dishonest, or shallow, would you still have stayed? Jacob did not hesitate. Eunice swallowed. Why? Because then you would not have been the woman I married. She closed her eyes briefly. I don't want to be protected, she said. I want to be respected. Jacob answered quietly. Then tell me where the line is. Eunice met his gaze steadily. No more secrets that change my life without my voice. Jacob nodded. Agreed. She turned to leave. Eunice, he called. She paused. Whatever you choose, Jacob said, choose it because it's yours. As she walked away, Eunice felt something settle. Not certainty, not forgiveness, but ownership. For the first time since her life had been decided, for her Eunice was not reacting. She was choosing, and the world she knew now would have to adjust. The next week arrived like a storm that pretended to be a normal day. People in the village smiled at Eunice now, but the smiles were different too. Bright, too eager, too hungry. They greeted her as if she had become valuable overnight, as if her worth had been sleeping inside Jacob's secret wealth, waiting to be discovered. Eunice hated that. She could feel it in the way women offered her extra fruit at the market, in the way men suddenly said madam with forced respect, in the way children stared as if she might turn into a miracle if they watched long enough. Jacob's truth had not set her free. It had painted a target on her back. Jacob sensed it too. He appeared more often now, not hovering, but present like a quiet guard who refused to be seen as one. He walked with Eunice to the market when she allowed it. He stayed a few steps behind her when she requested space. He spoke politely to everyone, but his eyes remained alert, scanning the way a man scans when he has learned what human beings can do when money enters the room. Eunice did not return fully to his house, but she stopped running from him. That fragile balance might have survived if the world had allowed it. It didn't. The trouble began with Ruth Kiplagat. Eunice's mother collapsed one afternoon while sorting beans in the shade. It was not dramatic, no screaming, no grand scene. Ruth simply swayed her eyes, unfocusing her hands, slipping from the basket as if her body had quietly decided it was tired of carrying so much. Eunice caught her before she hit the ground. Mama, Eunice cried, shaking her gently. Mama, look at me. Ruth's lips moved, but no sound came. Within minutes, neighbors gathered. Samuel shouted for help. Someone ran for a motorcycle. The nearest clinic was small, underfunded, and overwhelmed. By the time Eunice arrived with her mother, the waiting area was packed with bodies and heat and impatience. A nurse glanced at Ruth's face and immediately frowned. She needs a proper hospital, the nurse said. Her blood pressure is dangerously high. Samuel looked helpless. Where the city, the nurse replied. A private hospital. This clinic cannot handle it. Eunice's heart hammered. How much will it cost? The nurse hesitated, then gave a number. Samuel's face drained. Eunice felt the old fear crawl up her spine, the fear of watching someone suffer, because money was missing. Then she felt something else. Anger. Not at poverty, not at fate, but at the fact that the world always demanded payment before mercy. Jacob arrived at the clinic within 20 minutes. No one had called him. Eunice knew in that instant that someone had run to tell him anyway. He entered calmly, but the entire room changed the way it changes when authority walks in. People stepped aside. Whispers rose. Jacob knelt beside Ruth, his eyes focused. He did not panic. He did not dramatize. "Can she speak?" he asked Eunice. "Barely," Eunice replied, voice breaking. "They say we need to take her to the city." Jacob stood. "We will." Samuel stepped forward, suspicious. "And how will you do that?" Jacob looked at him calmly. "The way I've been doing it." Samuel's jaw tightened. "So now you will display your wealth." Jacob's gaze sharpened slightly. "This is not display, this is urgency." Within minutes, an SUV arrived outside. Not the dusty village kind, the kind that looked out of place in a place like this. Two men stepped out. Eunice felt her stomach twist. Jacob turned to her. "Do you trust me?" Eunice stared at her mother's weak body on the clinic bed. She thought of every time life had demanded a choice from her without giving her time to breathe. "Yes," she whispered. "I trust you." Jacob nodded once and lifted Ruth carefully, instructing the men with quiet authority. Eunice climbed into the vehicle beside her mother, holding her hand tightly. Samuel climbed in too, still, tense, still prideful, still afraid of what this meant. The drive to the city felt unreal. The road changed from dust to asphalt. The buildings grew taller. Traffic thickened. Eunice watched through the window as the village life faded behind them, replaced by a world that looked like it belonged to someone else. Ruth groaned softly, her fingers tightening around Eunice's hand. "It's okay," Mama Eunice whispered. "Please hold on." When they arrived at the private hospital, everything moved quickly. Doctors came. Nurses wheeled Ruth away. Forms appeared. Eunice stood at the reception desk, her hands shaking. Samuel stood beside her, silent. The woman behind the desk looked up. Payment must be confirmed before admission. Eunice's chest tightened. Jacob stepped forward calmly and placed a card on the counter. The receptionist glanced at it, and her entire expression changed. "Yes, sir," she said instantly. "We will take care of everything." Samuel stared at Jacob in disbelief. Eunice stared too. Not because Jacob had paid, but because the hospital had moved like lightning for him. They were led into a private waiting area. The air smelled clean, expensive, unfamiliar. Eunice sat down slowly, feeling like she did not belong in any of it. Jacob sat across from her. For the first time, Eunice saw him not as a husband in a small village house, but as someone who could bend systems without raising his voice. Samuel broke the silence. "So you really are that kind of man," he said bitterly. Jacob looked at him. "I'm a man trying to save your wife." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "And after that, what then? You will hold it over us." Jacob's voice remained calm. "No." Samuel laughed sharply. "Then why hide it? Why marry my daughter and pretend to be poor Eunice?" Flinched. She had asked herself that same question in 100 different ways. Jacob took a slow breath. "Because I needed to know who would still look at me when I had nothing to offer." Samuel scoffed. "So my daughter was a test." Jacob's gaze hardened. "Your daughter was not a test. Your world was." Eunice's stomach twisted. Samuel stepped closer. "You think you're better than us." Jacob's eyes met his steadily. "Number one, I think money reveals people." Samuel raised his voice. "Then what does it reveal about you?" Jacob answered quietly, "That I don't want to be loved for it." Eunice felt tears sting her eyes, not because she pitied Jacob, but because for the first time she understood the loneliness inside that statement. A doctor entered, then breaking the tension. "Mrs. Kiplagat is stable," he said, "but she needs monitoring. Stress and long-term neglect have weakened her heart." Eunice exhaled shakily. "Will she be okay?" "She can be the doctor," replied. "But she needs rest, proper treatment, and a change in her environment." Samuel looked away, guilt flashing across his face. Eunice's chest tightened. She thought of her mother's years of labor, years of swallowing her own needs to keep the family alive. And now her body had finally collapsed under the weight of it. Jacob stood. "Give her the best care." The doctor nodded, recognizing authority again. After the doctor left, Eunice turned to Jacob, her voice trembling. "Thank you," she said. Jacob's face softened. "You don't have to thank me for caring about your mother." Eunice swallowed. "But you didn't have to bring your world into mine." Jacob met her gaze. "Eunice, your world is mine now, whether the village likes it or not." The words landed heavily, because Eunice realized something then. Jacob's wealth was not just a secret. It was a force, and forces didn't stay contained. They reshaped everything they touched. As she sat in that private waiting room, listening to the quiet hum of machines behind hospital doors, Eunice understood that the true cost of Jacob's truth was only beginning. And if she didn't learn to stand with her own voice, others would speak for her again. This time in a world where money moved faster than mercy. The hospital days stretched into a strange, suspended time, where Eunice felt both grateful and displaced. Ruth Kiplagat lay in a quiet, private room, now her breathing steadier, machines humming softly at her side. Nurses came and went with calm efficiency. Doctors spoke in measured tones. Everything worked because money had opened the door. Eunice sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Relief washed over her in waves, followed by something darker. Guilt. If Jacob had not been who he was, Ruth might still be lying on a clinic bench waiting for help that would come too late. Eunice hated that truth, even as she depended on it. Jacob visited daily, never staying long, never taking over the space. He greeted Ruth with gentle respect, asked the doctors precise questions, and always left before the room could begin to feel like his territory. Samuel noticed everything. "You act like a guest in a place you paid for," he said one evening, his tone sharp. Jacob replied evenly, "Ownership doesn't require occupation." Samuel scoffed. Easy words from a rich man. Jacob met his gaze. Hard lessons from a poor one. The tension between them thickened heavy with years of unspoken resentment and wounded pride. Eunice watched them carefully, realizing that Jacob's presence had not only saved her mother, it had exposed her father. That night, Eunice walked alone through the hospital corridor, trying to clear her head. Her thoughts kept circling the same question. What happens when help comes with power? She stopped near a glass wall overlooking the city. Lights stretched endlessly below, a map of ambition and hunger. Somewhere in that maze was the world. Jacob belonged to a world that moved, quickly, decided ruthlessly, and rarely asked permission. She heard footsteps behind her. Jacob stopped beside her, leaving a respectful distance. "You're thinking too loudly," he said gently. Eunice exhaled. "I don't know how to be grateful without feeling small." Jacob nodded. "That's the problem with rescue. It confuses gratitude with submission." She turned to him. "Then why do it? Because refusing to help would make me cruel," he said, "and helping without restraint would make me dangerous." Eunice studied his face. "Which are you now?" "Neither," he replied. "I'm trying to be careful." The next morning, Eunice overheard a conversation that changed everything. Two nurses whispered near the desk, unaware that Eunice stood within earshot. "That's her husband," one said quietly. "The Kalaba one." The billionaire, yes. The one with the logistics empire. The one who keeps his name out of the news. Eunice's heart skipped. Logistics empire. The phrase echoed painfully. She stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "What did you say?" The nurses froze. One stammered. "I'm sorry, madam." "We shouldn't." "What empire?" Eunice asked, her voice steady but cold. The nurse swallowed. "Kalaba Holdings, transport infrastructure ports, across multiple countries." Eunice thanked them politely and walked away before her legs could give out. The truth, it seemed, had layers. Jacob had not just hidden wealth, he had hidden scale. That evening, Eunice confronted him. "You're not just rich," she said. "You're powerful." Jacob closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me that?" "Because power changes how people listen," he replied. "And I wanted you to hear me before it did." Eunice's chest tightened. "You didn't give me the choice." "No," Jacob admitted. "I didn't." That night Eunice could not sleep. She thought of every moment she had defended Jacob against ridicule. Every time she had believed she was choosing dignity over comfort. And now she wondered whether those choices had been real or shaped by a truth she had not been allowed to see. The next day, Ruth woke stronger, her eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. "My child," she whispered, squeezing Eunice's hand. "That man. He is not ordinary." Eunice smiled faintly. "No, Mama. He isn't." Ruth studied her daughter's face carefully. "Do you love him?" The question hit harder than any accusation. Eunice hesitated. "I respect him." Ruth nodded slowly. "Respect can grow into love, but fear must never be invited." Eunice felt tears prick her eyes. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel Okoro arrived again, this time at the hospital. He did not seek attention. He spoke quietly with Jacob in the hallway, their conversation low and serious. Eunice watched from a distance. When Nathaniel left, Jacob approached her. "Things are moving faster than I wanted," he said. "What things?" Eunice asked. "Interest," Jacob replied. "People are connecting dots." Eunice's stomach dropped. "What does that mean for us?" Jacob answered honestly. "It means privacy will become expensive." "And who pays that cost?" she asked. Jacob did not answer immediately. "That's what I was afraid of," Eunice said quietly. That evening Samuel confronted Eunice privately. "You married into danger," he said. "Men like him don't stay simple." Eunice looked at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time, not as authority but as fear wearing pride. "I didn't marry danger," she replied. "I married a man who chose me without knowing what I would give him." Samuel shook his head. "No rich man chooses without expecting return." Eunice's voice hardened. "Then you don't know him." Samuel laughed bitterly. "And you think you do?" Eunice did not answer. That night Jacob came to Eunice with something unexpected. A folder. "Read this," he said. Inside were documents, trust arrangements, asset separations, legal structures. "I've already done this," Jacob explained, "before we married." Eunice looked up, stunned. "Why, so that my wealth would never be yours unless you chose it," he said, "and so that you would never be trapped by it." Her hands trembled. "You planned this?" she asked. "I planned for your freedom," he replied. Tears spilled down Eunice's cheeks. For the first time she saw what Jacob had risked. Not money, not reputation, but control. "I don't know if I can live in your world," she said softly. Jacob answered gently, "Then don't. Build your own." Silence wrapped around them, not heavy this time, clarifying. Eunice realized something profound then. Jacob's secret was not his wealth. It was his willingness to let go of it. And that frightened her more than any fortune ever could, because it meant the choice was truly hers now. And whatever came next, acceptance, rejection, or something in between, would no longer be decided for her. The truth had finished revealing itself. Now came the consequences. The morning Eunice decided to leave the city, woke under a pale sky that looked undecided, neither promising rain nor offering warmth. It felt appropriate. Nothing in her life felt settled anymore. Ruth was improving. Doctors spoke of recovery plans and long-term care. Samuel had grown quieter, his anger dulled by gratitude he refused to name. The crisis that had brought them all into the city was passing, and with it the excuse Eunice had been using to delay her choice. Jacob found her packing a small bag. "I'm not disappearing," Eunice said before he could speak. "I'm stepping back." Jacob nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "To a place that doesn't belong to you," she replied, "or to my father, or to anyone who can claim me." He accepted that without argument. How long? "As long as it takes for my voice to sound like mine again." Jacob took a breath. "I won't follow you, I know, and I won't send anyone." "I know," she repeated, surprised by the relief that brought. She left that morning with a borrowed bus ticket and a single suitcase. The city receded through the window, replaced by long roads and smaller towns. Eunice felt lighter with each mile, even as fear tapped at her ribs. She arrived in a modest town where no one knew her name. She rented a room from an elderly woman who asked no questions and offered tea without curiosity. Eunice took work at a textile shop, folding cloth, organizing shelves, listening more than speaking. The days were simple, honest. The pay was small, but it was hers. At night she wrote. She wrote about the girl who had been offered instead of asked, about the man who had chosen restraint over display, about the way money bent rooms and how silence sometimes screamed louder than wealth. She wrote until the words steadied her breathing. Back in the city, Jacob kept his distance. He handled interest discreetly. He redirected attention away from the village. He instructed Nathaniel to stall inquiries without creating waves. He visited Ruth quietly and spoke to doctors without urgency. When Samuel avoided him, Jacob let him. Restraint, he reminded himself, was not absence. It was choice. But the world was less patient than Jacob. A business publication leaked a profile, carefully worded, deliberately vague. It spoke of a reclusive billionaire with roots in unexpected places. Speculation ignited, names trended, photos circulated. Someone posted a picture from the market weeks earlier, the SUV, the men, the envelope. The village recognized itself overnight. Eunice heard about it from a coworker who showed her the article on a phone. "Looks like trouble," the woman said, casually. Eunice nodded. "It often does." That evening, Jacob called for the first time since she left. "I won't ask you to come back," he said, "but I need you to know what's coming." "What's coming?" Eunice asked. "Noise," Jacob replied, "and pressure. People will try to speak for you." Eunice closed her eyes. "Let them try." There was a pause. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Are you angry?" "No," she said honestly. "I'm clear." That clarity mattered more than anger ever could. 2 days later, Veronica Adebayo found Eunice, not by accident. She arrived at the textile shop with a smile that tried to pass for kindness. "You're hard to track," Veronica said, glancing around with disdain. Eunice met her gaze calmly. "You shouldn't have tried." Veronica's smile thinned. "You've become interesting. I've become unavailable." Eunice corrected. Veronica leaned closer. "People want interviews, stories, a face to attach to the myth." "I'm not a myth," Eunice said, "and I don't belong to the story you want." Veronica laughed softly. "You married power. You don't get to opt out." Eunice's voice was steady. "Watch me." Veronica's eyes hardened. "He will choose the empire." Eunice replied quietly, "And I will choose myself." Veronica left empty-handed. That night Eunice wrote again, this time about boundaries. about how choosing oneself was not abandonment but alignment. She slept deeply without dreams. In the city, the pressure escalated. A board member demanded Jacob clarify his personal life. An investor hinted at reputational risk. A journalist requested a comment from the wife. Jacob declined all of it. Silence, Nathaniel warned, will be interpreted. Let it, Jacob replied. Interpretation is cheaper than truth, but silence has a way of inviting others to speak louder. A morning talk show aired speculation. A guest suggested Eunice had married for money and fled for leverage. Another implied manipulation. The narrative hardened quickly. Eunice heard it on the radio at the shop. She turned it off. That evening, she called Jacob. "I won't be defended," she said, "and I won't be used." Jacob answered immediately. "I won't let them rewrite you. You don't have to," Eunice said. "I'll speak when I'm ready." When Jacob asked, "When my words won't belong to anyone else." The next day, Eunice resigned from the shop and took a bus to the city, not to Jacob's home, but to a small legal aid office, recommended by the elderly woman she rented from. She met with a counselor. She asked questions. She learned the difference between publicity and consent. 2 weeks later, Eunice stood in a small room with a single camera and a neutral interviewer. No logos, no sponsors, no spectacle. She spoke plainly. "I was forced into a marriage," she said, "and I stayed because respect met me where fear had lived. Wealth did not save me. Choices did." She refused to discuss numbers. She refused to perform gratitude. She named the harm of assumptions and the cost of silence. She did not defend Jacob. She described him. She did not condemn the village. She described the system. The clip spread not explosively, but steadily. People listened. Jacob watched alone. When it ended, he felt something settle in his chest. Not relief, not pride. Recognition. That night, Eunice returned to the hospital to sit beside Ruth, who smiled with tired eyes. "You sound like yourself again," Ruth said softly. Eunice squeezed her hand. "I am." Outside the room, Jacob waited, not stepping in, not summoning attention, just present. Eunice met his eyes. "I'm not coming back to be protected," she said. "I know," Jacob replied. "I'm coming back to be equal." He nodded once. "Then come when you're ready." Eunice took a breath. She was. Equality. Eunice learned was not a moment, it was a practice. Returning to Jacob's house did not feel like coming home, nor did it feel like surrender. It felt like entering a space that required negotiation. The door opened to the same modest rooms, the same quiet order. But the air carried a different weight now. Not secrecy, responsibility. Jacob did not rush toward her. He did not apologize theatrically or promise change with empty vows. He stepped aside and let her walk in first. That mattered. They sat across from each other at the small table, where so many careful conversations had begun. Eunice placed her bag down slowly, as if claiming territory. "I didn't come back because the noise faded," she said. "It hasn't." Jacob nodded. "I didn't expect it to. I came back because I won't let the world decide what my marriage means," she continued, "including you." He met her gaze. "Then tell me what it means." Eunice took a breath. "It means no more protection without consent, no more decisions that change my life made in silence, and no more hiding me to manage your image." Jacob listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said only one word. "Agreed." The simplicity surprised her. "I'm serious," she said. "This isn't symbolic." "I know," Jacob replied. "That's why I agreed." The next days tested that promise immediately. Invitations arrived, polite, persistent, strategic. Charity dinners, industry panels, private meetings disguised as social gestures. Each one carried an unspoken expectation. "Bring your wife." Jacob brought none of them to Eunice. Instead, he showed her the list and asked, "Which, if any?" She studied the names and shook her head. "Not yet." "Then not yet," he said. The village, however, had already decided to reclaim its authority. Samuel arrived unannounced one evening, his posture stiff, his pride sharpened by embarrassment. "You humiliated me," he said to Eunice without greeting. She did not rise. "I didn't speak your name." "You spoke of systems," Samuel snapped. "People know who that means." Eunice looked at him steadily. Then perhaps the system recognized itself. Samuel turned to Jacob. "You turned my daughter against me." Jacob stood slowly. Number one refused to replace her voice with mine. Samuel scoffed. "You think this is strength," Jacob answered calmly. "I think strength doesn't fear a woman who speaks." Silence fell heavy. Ruth, seated near the doorway, finally spoke. "Samuel, sit down." He froze, stunned by the command. She looked at Eunice. "Your daughter didn't leave you. She grew." Samuel sank into the chair, deflated. The argument lost its sharpness, leaving only grief. That night, Eunice cried quietly, not from pain but release. Jacob did not touch her. He sat close enough to be felt, far enough to be invited. The following week brought a new challenge, one Eunice had not anticipated. A foundation Jacob funded announced a scholarship initiative for young women from rural communities. The press framed it as redemption, as image repair. Eunice read the headlines with clenched teeth. "This wasn't my idea," Jacob said immediately when she confronted him. "But it's mine to correct." How, she asked. "By refusing to let them use us," he replied. "I will suspend public announcements." Eunice considered. "No." He paused. "No. Do it," she said, "but do it differently." They spent hours drafting language together. Eunice insisted the program include community leadership roles, not just money. She demanded transparency, local oversight, and a clause protecting recipients from publicity pressure. Jacob signed every revision without resistance. When the announcement went out again, the tone changed. The noise softened. The work spoke louder than the names attached. Equality, Eunice realized, required labor. Then came the night that tested it all. A gala one Jacob could not decline without consequences. Contracts depended on presence. Silence would not suffice. He told Eunice the truth plainly. "I need to go," he said, "and I won't go without you unless you choose it." Eunice looked at the invitation. She felt the old fear stir rooms full of people who would see her as accessory symbol story. "I'll come," she said finally. "But on my terms." They agreed on boundaries. No interviews, no introductions without consent, no photos beyond arrival, and one exit plan, hers. The gala shimmered with wealth that tried to look like taste. Eunice felt it immediately, the assessing glances, the subtle recalibrations, when her face did not match their expectations. Jacob did not guide her. He walked beside her. When a journalist approached, Jacob raised a hand. "Not tonight." When an executive asked Eunice what she did, she answered calmly, "I decide what I don't." The questioner blinked, unsure how to proceed. They did not stay long. On the drive home, Eunice felt an unexpected calm. "They didn't own me," she said softly. Jacob smiled. "No one does." The days that followed were quieter, but not simpler. Eunice began working with a small community organization in the city, unpaid at first, then as a consultant. She learned budgets, policy, language, negotiation. She built something that existed outside Jacob's shadow. Jacob watched, careful not to interfere. One evening she found him reviewing a contract with a tense expression. "Problem?" she asked. "An investor wants assurance," Jacob said, "about stability." Eunice nodded. "About me?" "Yes." She sat down. "What did you tell them?" "That my marriage isn't a strategy," Jacob replied, "and that instability comes from pretending it is." He looked at her. "If that costs me, I accept it." Eunice studied him, searching for the familiar calculation. She didn't find it. "I won't let you sacrifice your work for me," she said. "I won't let my work silence you," he replied. They understood each other then. Not perfectly, but honestly. Weeks later, Eunice stood before a small room of women from villages like hers. She spoke without spectacle, without slogans. Choice, she said, is not freedom by itself. It's responsibility. And responsibility is heavier. But it's yours. When she finished, there was no applause. Only nods. That night, Jacob asked her a question he had been holding. "Do you love me?" he asked. Eunice did not rush the answer. "I choose you," she said finally. "Every day I'm allowed to." He accepted that as love. Because it was. Choice once claimed, demanded maintenance. Eunice discovered this quickly. The more visible her voice became, the more carefully the world listened, not to understand, but to position itself. Invitations arrived with subtler language. Requests came wrapped in praise. Even kindness learned to carry expectations. She refused most of it. Instead, Eunice built structure. She met weekly with the community organization she had begun, advising not as a symbol, but as a worker. She learned how budgets breathed and how programs failed when ego replaced accountability. She asked questions that made rooms uncomfortable. She insisted on timelines, on reports, on outcomes. People began to trust her not because of Jacob, but because she remembered details and returned calls. Jacob watched from the edge, proud but restrained. "You don't need me," he said one evening. Half statement, half question. Eunice smiled. "That's the point." The next test came quietly, as most real tests did. A rumor began, circulating online, soft at first, then sharper. It suggested Eunice had leveraged her marriage to redirect funds, that her independence was performative, that her advocacy masked influence. Jacob found out before she did. "I can shut it down," he said, holding his phone. "One call." Eunice shook her head. "No. They're questioning your integrity. They're testing it," she replied. "Let them." Jacob hesitated. "It will hurt. It will pass," Eunice said. "If it's untrue." The rumor grew legs as rumors do. A blog picked it up. Then another. Screenshots without context. Quotes bent out of shape. Eunice kept working. She documented meetings. She published disclosures. She opened her calendar and made her boundaries public. She refused to comment on speculation and answered questions about process instead. Within days, the rumor collapsed under its own weight. Trust, she learned, was quieter than accusation, but stronger. That weekend, they visited Ruth at the hospital. She was sitting up now, her eyes brighter, her hands steadier. The city had softened her edges, but she carried the village in her posture still. "You look different," Ruth said to Eunice. Eunice laughed softly. "So do you." Ruth turned to Jacob. "You listen more than you speak." Jacob smiled. "I've learned the cost of speaking early." Ruth nodded approvingly. "Good." On the way home, Eunice felt a heaviness she could not place. She was tired, but not the kind of tired that came from work, the kind that came from responsibility. That night, she asked Jacob a question she had been circling for weeks. "What do you want?" she asked. He looked up from the book he was reading. What about us?" she said. "About the future." Jacob considered carefully. "I want a partnership that survives attention, and work that matters without consuming the people I love." Eunice nodded. "And children," he paused, "only if they don't inherit our battles." She felt relief she hadn't expected. "I want space," Eunice said. "For myself, for us, and for failure." Jacob smiled faintly. "Failure." "Yes," she said. "The right to get things wrong without becoming a headline." They sat with that. The following month, Jacob faced a decision that would ripple outward. A major contract opportunity arose, lucrative, influential, and deeply visible. It would expand Kalaba Holdings into new regions, triple capacity, and anchor Jacob's reputation in places he had carefully avoided. It would also put Eunice directly in the spotlight again. Jacob brought the proposal home and laid it on the table. "I won't sign this without you," he said. Eunice read quietly, line by line. She asked questions, many of them uncomfortable. She circled clauses that centralized power too tightly. She flagged partnerships that prioritized speed over impact. Finally, she looked up. "You can do this," she said. "But not like this." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Meaning, split the oversight," Eunice replied. "Local leadership, independent audits, and no public positioning that uses us as proof of virtue." Jacob nodded slowly. "That will slow everything." "Good," she said. "Some things should be slow." He signed only after the revisions were made. The deal moved forward. Less flashy, more grounded. Investors complained quietly. Communities responded openly. Equality, Eunice realized, was not 50-50. It was shared consequence. Then came the moment she hadn't prepared for. A letter arrived from a rural school she had worked with briefly months earlier. They invited her to serve as an interim director, not as a patron, but as leadership. The role was demanding, underfunded, remote, and entirely hers. She stared at the letter long after Jacob had gone to bed. The next morning she placed it on the table. "I'm going to accept," she said. Jacob read it, then looked up. When soon she replied, "For a year," he nodded once. "I'll support you." "I don't need support," Eunice said gently. "I need space." Jacob smiled. "Then I'll respect you." They planned carefully. Separate schedules, clear expectations. No grand gestures. The village reacted predictably confused, judgmental, curious. "She's leaving him now." He let her. Eunice did not respond. The school welcomed her with skepticism and hope. The work was relentless. Roofs leaked, teachers burned out, children arrived hungry. Eunice rolled up her sleeves. She learned to listen before speaking. She learned to say no. She learned to fail and correct quickly. Jacob visited once quietly. He fixed a broken generator and left without announcement. They spoke weekly, sometimes about work, sometimes about nothing, always honestly. At the end of the year, the school stabilized, not transformed, but steadier. Eunice returned home, thinner, stronger, clearer. Jacob met her at the door. "You're different," he said. "So are you," she replied. They stood in the quiet house, older than when they had entered it, lighter than when they had left. "I don't want to be hidden," Eunice said, "but I don't want to be displayed either." Jacob nodded. "Then we live plainly." And they did. They hosted small dinners. They walked in the evenings. They declined invitations that demanded performance. Love, Eunice realized, was not a feeling she waited for. It was a series of choices that respected her voice. And for the first time, she chose without fear. The village did not welcome Eunice back the way it welcomed rumors. Her return was quiet. No convoy, no announcement, no borrowed importance. She arrived with a single bag and a posture that no longer sought permission. The dust was the same. The paths were familiar. But the air felt different, charged with expectation, that did not dare to speak first. People watched from doorways. Some nodded politely. Others pretended not to notice her at all. Jacob did not walk beside her this time. He arrived later that evening alone on foot as he had the first day. No suits, no bodyguards, only the man the village remembered, except the village could no longer decide what he was. That uncertainty made them uncomfortable. Eunice began by visiting the elders, not to explain herself, not to ask forgiveness, but to state boundaries. "I'm here to work," she said calmly, "not to perform." An elder cleared his throat. "Work for whom?" "For the community," Eunice replied. "With the community. If you want it." Silence followed. One man shifted, and your husband, Eunice, met his gaze. "Is not the topic." The elders exchanged looks. They had expected deference. They received clarity instead. Permission was granted cautiously. The work began the next morning. Eunice focused on practical things, repairing the water point, organizing school supplies, coordinating with a health outreach group she had partnered with during her year away. She asked women what they needed and listened when the answers contradicted assumptions. She hired locally. She published budgets on a chalkboard in the community center. Transparency unsettled people used to favors. Veronica Adebayo noticed immediately. She approached Eunice in the market with a practiced smile. "You've come to show us how it's done." "I've come to do it with us," Eunice replied. Veronica laughed softly. "You could have sent money." "I sent myself," Eunice said. "It lasts longer." Veronica's smile thinned. The real test came a week later. A meeting was called, unusual, sudden, crowded. People gathered under the open shade near the community center. Eunice stood at the front with a small stack of papers. Jacob stood off to the side, deliberately uncentered. A man rose. "We hear funds are coming through you now." Eunice nodded. "Some, with oversight. From your husband. From partnerships," she corrected. "Reviewed locally." Murmurs rippled. Another voice cut through. "So we must answer to you." Eunice took a breath. "No. You answer to each other." A woman stood older, tired. "Then why you, Eunice, did not rush the answer?" "Because I left and came back without asking for your approval. And because I'm willing to be corrected publicly." That quieted the crowd. A younger man scoffed. "And when the money stops, it will." Eunice said plainly, "That's why we're building systems that survive without it." Jacob watched closely. She did not look to him once. That night Eunice lay awake, listening to the village sounds she had grown up with. Jacob joined her on the mat, not touching. "You were clear today," he said. "I was honest," she replied. "They'll test you. They already are." The next test arrived sooner than expected. A local contractor accused Eunice of favoritism after losing a bid. He spoke loudly, publicly, weaving a story that hinted at influence and arrogance. The crowd swelled, curious. Jacob stepped forward instinctively. Eunice raised a hand. "I'll answer," she said. She produced the posted criteria. She invited an independent review from the elders. She offered the contractor a chance to respond on record. The accusation dissolved under daylight. People dispersed quietly, some impressed, others unsettled by process. They couldn't bend. Later, Samuel approached her. "You're making enemies," he warned. Eunice nodded. "I'm making rules." He studied her. "You sound like him." She smiled faintly. "I learned restraint from him, voice from myself." Samuel looked toward Jacob, who was repairing a bench nearby with a child watching. "You could have avoided all this," Samuel said. "I could have avoided myself," Eunice replied. "I chose not to." The following Sunday, the church filled beyond capacity. Not for Eunice, for Jacob. Whispers had grown teeth. Curiosity demanded spectacle. People wanted to see the man they had mocked and measured wrong. Pastor Emmanuel spoke carefully. "We gather for reflection, not inspection." Jacob took a seat at the back. When the sermon ended, a man stood. "We owe him an apology." Another voice added, "And her." The room shifted. Jacob remained seated. Eunice stood. "We don't need apologies," she said calmly. "We need memory." She turned to the congregation. "Remember how easy it was to laugh. Remember how quick you were to assume. And remember that dignity is not revealed by money." The room was silent. After service, people approached in ones and twos. Some apologized, others offered help. A few kept their distance. That was enough. The work deepened. The water point reopened. The school received supplies. A women's cooperative formed with rotating leadership. Eunice refused to chair it. "Leadership must move," she said, "or it becomes ownership." Jacob supported, quietly reviewing contracts, arranging logistics, training a local team to manage accounts without him. Then came the confrontation. Eunice had known was coming. Veronica arrived at the community center with a proposal. Lavish, glossy, fast. She spoke of expansion visibility sponsorships that carried her name. "We can make this bigger," Veronica said. Eunice read the document carefully. "At the cost of control." Veronica smiled. "At the benefit of speed." Eunice closed the folder. "No." Veronica's eyes hardened. "You're turning down power." "I'm turning down leverage," Eunice replied. Veronica leaned in. "You think this ends well?" Eunice met her gaze. "I think it ends honestly." Veronica left furious. That night, Jacob asked Eunice a question he had been holding. "Do you feel like you belong here again?" Eunice thought carefully. "I feel accountable." He nodded. "That's heavier." "Yes," she agreed, "but it's mine." A month later, the elders invited Eunice to present outcomes, not promises results. She did. Numbers, photos, timelines, failures included. When she finished, an elder stood. "You did not come to rule." Eunice shook her head. "I came to return." The elder nodded slowly. "Then stay." Eunice looked around the room at faces that had once reduced her to a transaction. "I will," she said, "as long as we keep choosing together." Jacob watched from the doorway, a small smile on his face. The village had not changed overnight, but something had shifted. Not because a billionaire had arrived, but because a woman who had been forced into silence returned with her voice intact. And this time she did not ask to be heard. She spoke and let the truth do the work. Success did not arrive with applause. It arrived with tension. As the village project stabilized, attention shifted again, this time, not from curiosity, but from interest sharpened by opportunity. Outsiders came with polished smiles and proposals that spoke the language of partnership while hiding the grammar of control. They praised Eunice's leadership. They admired the model. They asked how it could be scaled. Eunice listened. Scaling, she knew, was where many good intentions broke. Jacob felt it too. The quiet evenings they once shared were now interrupted by calls from different time zones. Not urgent, strategic. He answered fewer of them than before, and when he did, he kept his responses short. One night, as they walked along the edge of the fields, Jacob spoke carefully. "There's pressure to formalize what you're doing." Eunice stopped. "Formalize how boards, branding, a foundation with your name attached." She exhaled. "That's what I was afraid of." "They'll do it with or without us," Jacob said. "If not here, somewhere else." Eunice looked at him. "So the question isn't whether it happens. It's how." They spent weeks debating details that felt small, but carried weight: naming, governance, exit clauses, protections against capture. Eunice insisted on rotating leadership and community veto power. Jacob insisted on transparency that could survive scrutiny. Neither yielded easily. Their arguments were not loud. They were precise. One evening, exhausted, Eunice said what had been sitting in her chest. "I don't want to become a bridge people cross to reach you." Jacob answered without defensiveness. "And I don't want to be a shadow you keep explaining." They understood each other better than agreement ever could. The foundation launched quietly, without ceremony. No portraits, no gala, just documents, local signatories, and public commitments that limited both their influence. It drew less attention than expected, and that was the point. Then came the season Eunice had been dreading. The media returned. Not with malice, but persistence. A profile framed her as the woman who changed a billionaire. Another suggested she was proof that wealth could be tamed by virtue. Eunice read neither. She focused on work, but the words seeped in anyway. One afternoon, a young woman approached Eunice near the water point. "They say you saved him." Eunice shook her head, gently. "No one saves anyone like that." "Then what did you do?" the woman asked. Eunice considered. "I refused to disappear." The answer felt sufficient. That evening, Jacob found Eunice sitting alone, her hands still, her eyes tired. "You don't have to carry this," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I won't hand it off either." He nodded. There's a difference. The next challenge came from inside. A disagreement erupted within the cooperative. Two leaders accused each other of favoritism. Voices rose. Sides formed. The work threatened to fracture. Eunice called a meeting, not to decide, to listen. She insisted on open records. She invited an external mediator. She stepped back from the room when tempers flared, letting the process do what authority often ruined. The resolution came slowly, imperfectly. One leader stepped down, the other accepted oversight. Trust bent but did not break. Later, Jacob said quietly, "You could have ended that with one call." Eunice smiled faintly and taught them nothing. That night they really argued for the first time in months. Not about money, about pace. "You're burning out," Jacob said. "You're hovering," Eunice shot back. They stood on opposite sides of the room. Both right, both unwilling to concede. Finally, Eunice spoke softer. "I don't want to be protected from my own limits." Jacob's shoulders dropped. "And I don't want to watch you hit them alone." They found a compromise, scheduled rest, delegated authority, a rule that neither would step in without being asked. Love, Eunice realized, was not the absence of conflict. It was the discipline of repair. The following month, Jacob faced a reckoning of his own. A longtime partner challenged his decisions publicly, questioning his priorities, and hinting that his personal life had softened his edge. The accusation spread quickly. Jacob responded once. At a meeting, he said calmly, "If my edge required ignoring people I love, it was never strength." The partner withdrew. Costs followed. A deal collapsed. Another stalled. Jacob accepted it without complaint. That evening, Eunice found him sitting in the dark, thoughtful. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He shook his head. "I regret waiting so long to choose." She sat beside him, close enough to share the silence. Weeks later, the village celebrated the reopening of the school hall. Repaired roof-stocked shelves, a modest library. Children filled the space with noise and movement. Eunice stood at the back unnoticed. Jacob stood farther back still. An elder approached Eunice. "They look to you now," Eunice replied carefully. "Then we teach them to look to each other." The elder nodded, satisfied. That night, under a clear sky, Jacob asked Eunice to walk with him beyond the village lights. They stopped where the ground dipped and the air cooled. "I want to ask you something," he said. She waited. "Not as a solution," Jacob continued, "as a choice." He took a breath. "Will you keep building this life with me, even when it costs us comfort, applause, and certainty?" Eunice did not answer immediately. She thought of the girl who had been offered, instead of asked, of the woman who had left to find her voice, of the work that demanded patience more than praise. "Yes," she said finally, "as long as we keep choosing each other without erasing ourselves." Jacob nodded. "Then yes." They returned home quietly. The village slept. The work waited. In the days that followed, Eunice felt a shift, not in circumstance but in weight. The burden of being seen had lessened. The work had found hands beyond hers. The foundation functioned without their constant presence. They stepped back together, not away. Just enough. On a warm afternoon, Eunice watched children read under the shade of the repaired hall. She felt tired in a way that satisfied rather than drained. Jacob joined her, ready to leave it for a while. "Yes," she said. "It needs space, too." They planned a small trip, no announcements, no itinerary shared. Just movement. As they packed, Eunice caught her reflection. Older than the bride, she had been steadier than the woman who had returned. She smiled. The world had tried to define her by sacrifice, then by proximity to power. She had chosen something harder, presence. And in that choice, love had found its shape. They left before dawn without ceremony. No convoy, no announcements, no careful photographs meant to prove humility. Just 2 small bags, a borrowed car, and a road that stretched forward without asking who they were. For the first time in a long while, Eunice felt light, not because responsibility had vanished, but because it no longer clung to her skin like a debt. She watched the landscape change through the window villages, waking slowly, fields catching the first sun, people beginning ordinary days, unaware of how much meaning could be carried quietly. Jacob drove without hurry. "Where are we going?" Eunice asked. "Somewhere anonymous," he replied. "And then we'll decide." They stayed in modest places, ate food no one tried to impress them with, walked without being recognized. For days they spoke very little about work money or plans. Instead, they spoke about childhood memories, small regrets, things they had never needed to say aloud before. One evening, sitting outside a guest house with chipped paint and warm light, Eunice finally laughed the kind of laugh that surprised her own body. "I don't feel like anyone's lesson right now," she said. Jacob smiled. "Good. Lessons should be learned, not lived forever." When they returned weeks later, the village did not rush to greet them. That Eunice realized was progress. The cooperative continued its work. The foundation ran without calling Jacob for every decision. The school hall stayed open even when no one important visited. Life did not pause to acknowledge their return. Eunice resumed her role, slowly, intentionally. She attended meetings but no longer chaired them. She advised when asked, listened more than she spoke. When disagreements arose, she resisted the urge to solve them personally. Leadership, she had learned, was not about presence. It was about continuity. Jacob did the same. He restructured his work to function without him at the center, promoted leaders who disagreed with him, declined opportunities that demanded performance instead of progress. The empire did not shrink, but it grew quieter, steadier. Some called it wasted potential. Jacob called it alignment. One afternoon, as Eunice reviewed reports under the shade near the water point, a young girl approached her hesitantly. "Are you the woman who married the ugly man?" the girl asked, wide-eyed. Eunice laughed softly. "Is that what they told you?" The girl nodded. "They say he was ugly, and then he was rich." Eunice knelt to meet her eye level. "He was never ugly," she said gently, "and he was always rich, just not in the way people look first." The girl frowned, thinking. "Will I have to marry someone I don't choose?" she asked. Eunice felt the question settle deep in her chest. "No," she said firmly. "Not if you learn to speak before the world decides for you." That night, Eunice told Jacob about the conversation. He was quiet for a moment. "You're becoming the story people tell when they need courage." Eunice shook her head. "I don't want to be a story, then be a pattern," Jacob said. "Something repeatable." The following months confirmed what they had both sensed. The village no longer needed them at the center. That was the victory. Eunice received an offer to consult regionally, train leaders, design accountability frameworks, mentor women who had never been asked what they wanted. She accepted on one condition: the work must eventually function without her. Jacob supported it without trying to shape it. They traveled separately at times, reunited without suspicion, missed each other without fear. Trust had settled into their relationship, like a foundation unseen essential. One evening during a quiet dinner at home, Eunice set her fork down. "I want to renew our vows," she said. Jacob looked up surprised. "Publicly?" "No," Eunice replied. "Honestly." They planned it simply. No guests from the city, no press. Just their parents, a few elders, and the women who had worked beside Eunice from the beginning. On the day of the ceremony, the sun was gentle, not harsh, not dramatic. Eunice wore a simple dress she chose herself. Jacob stood waiting, his posture calm, his eyes steady. When it was Eunice's turn to speak, she did not look at the crowd. She looked at him. "I was given to you without my consent," she said clearly. but I stayed because you never treated me like something given." Murmurs rippled softly. "I choose you," she continued, "not because you are powerful, but because you make room for my power." Jacob swallowed. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "I hid my wealth because I feared being loved for it," he said. "But you taught me that love is not what is offered, it is what is allowed." He paused, then added, "I choose you, not because you need me, but because you don't." There was no applause, only stillness. Afterward, people ate together, laughed softly, returned to their lives without spectacle. That evening, Eunice and Jacob sat outside their home watching the light fade. "Do you ever think about how it began?" Eunice asked. "Yes," Jacob replied. "Often. And does it still hurt?" Jacob considered. "It reminds me of what that dignity can survive humiliation," he said, "and that patience reveals what force never could." Eunice nodded. "It reminds me that silence isn't peace." They sat with that. Years later, when the village no longer whispered their names, when the foundation no longer needed oversight, when children who had used the repaired hall grew into leaders themselves, Eunice would look back on that forced marriage not as a wound, but as a turning. Not because suffering was noble, but because choice reclaimed it. She had not been saved by a billionaire. She had not risen because of money. She had learned to stand. And Jacob Kalaba, once mocked, once hidden, had learned that love was not proven by sacrifice but by restraint. Together, they built a marriage that did not shine from distance. It worked up close. In the end, their story was not about wealth disguised as humility or beauty revealed too late. It was about two people who refused to let the world define their worth and chose again and again to listen before speaking, to stay before fleeing, and to love without erasing themselves. And if there was a lesson in that, it was this: your value is not decided by what you are given, but by what you choose to protect. What would you have done if you were Eunice? Would you have stayed silent or claimed your voice? If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful emotional stories about dignity, choice, and the courage to become yourself. This story is not really about wealth, beauty, or a hidden billionaire. It is about something far more fragile and far more powerful: choice. Eunice's life was decided for her long before she understood what consent meant. Like many people around the world, she was taught that survival required silence, that gratitude was owed even for pain, and that endurance was the same as dignity. But endurance alone is not dignity. Dignity begins the moment a person is allowed to speak and is heard. Jacob's wealth did not save Eunice. In fact, it almost erased her. Money has a way of turning people into symbols, tools, or strategies. What made Jacob different was not that he was rich, but that he learned restraint. He learned that love is not proven by control, protection, or sacrifice made for someone without their voice. Real love is proven by space to choose, to fail, to grow, and to walk away if necessary. Eunice's true transformation did not happen when she discovered Jacob was a billionaire. It happened when she realized she did not need to be grateful for what she never asked for. She learned that kindness without consent can still be a cage, and that silence may keep peace for a moment, but it slowly steals the self. This story reminds us that power does not come from having more. It comes from deciding who you are, even when the world is watching. Not everyone will be given the chance to start life freely. But everyone at some point faces a moment where they must decide, will I disappear to survive, or will I speak and risk becoming visible? And for those who hold power, money, status, influence, this story carries a quiet warning. If love costs someone their voice, it is not love, it is ownership. True partnership is not about rescue. True dignity is not about endurance. True freedom begins when choice is respected. Now we'd love to hear from you. What part of Eunice's journey touched you the most? Have you ever had to find your voice after being silenced? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you enjoy deep emotional stories about dignity, courage and life-changing choices, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.